You are listening to LatinxAmerica, a podcast focused on highlighting catalysts who are using, leveraging, or creating technology to help our community achieve more. With your host, Adriana Flores Ragade.
Thanks for joining us again. Today's guest is Maria Medrano. She leads Cisco's Global Inclusion and Collaboration Strategic Initiatives and Employee Community Strategy, which are designed to fuel exponential growth for the company's employees, customers, and partners. Leveraging Cisco's collaborative technology, her team creates business-relevant strategies and value creation programs that support Cisco's employee resource organizations, networks, virtual groups, and global ambassadors. Her team drives broad adoption and integration of inclusive behaviors and works with executives to instill accountability and change. Maria Medrano, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your willingness to share your experience and just being accessible because I know that many people in your position travel a lot, you're extremely busy, so the time that you're not with your family or at work, we're delighted that you're spending part of that time with us. So why don't we start by learning a bit about your journey and your personal experience of how you got to where you are.
Great. Well, thank you for the invitation to share, and thank you for the opportunity to share my personal story. It's one that comes with a lot of memories and a lot of times to reflect and think about the experiences that I've been given and the experiences I've had to get me to where I'm at today. I can tell you that I'm the oldest in my family. I'm the oldest and the only girl in a first-generation Mexican-American family. I have 3 younger brothers, and I have 2 parents who've done nothing but love and support us, but also grow up alongside with us because they both came to the country and were pretty much very young parents for us. I grew up in the city of San Francisco, California, which I think was probably the first opportunity I was given, just being born in a city of that magnitude. It gave me the opportunity to be able to experience a big city and to explore things that most families in our situation would have not had the opportunity to explore. We lived in a mission district area, so it was one that was full of a lot of culture. A lot of times now that I reflect back, even being as a student, not realizing that we were in a low economic region of the city because it was so full of opportunities and love and experiences. And when I say opportunities, I think of opportunities as looking many, many different ways. The opportunity of being able to be hired by my neighbor to pick up her 5-year-old daughter to walk her to school every day at the age of 8 and getting paid $5 at the end of the week. I mean, that for me was a huge opportunity, right? And it showed me the value of working and the value of being able to save for something that I really, really wanted. Being in the city and being able to take a quarter and, taking the bus to the nearest library or the nearest museum and being able to be a student inside of those classrooms where the school districts there really took care of the students and being able to go to the opera or the symphony or the museums. Those were things that gave me the opportunity to be exposed to, that I talked to folks that are in my situation who had much more access to capital or dollars, and that just wasn't something that was made available to them in their particular region. So I look back and I think that those experiences gave me the opportunity to ask the question, why not me? And why don't I have the opportunities to be able to do something bigger? I can tell you that growing up as a child in the Mission District to 2 parents who were both first generation. My dad recently immigrating from Mexico. My mom growing up in San Francisco but was first generation herself. I made the assumption that most folks were not given the opportunity to work. When that wasn't the case, there was a lot of discrimination, that was happening. And a lot that was happening was opportunities weren't being given to certain people because of their skin color or because of language barriers or because of educational backgrounds. And so growing up in the city, I started asking questions around, well, why can't my parents do this? And why can't my parents do that? And the answer I always got back was, you just need to go to school. Just continue to go to school and you'll be able to grow the skill sets you need to be able to do something bigger. So as a kid, my biggest opportunity that I had was to go to school. And as a kid, my biggest opportunity that I thought that I had was to become a teacher to teach the next wave of students coming through. And so what you'll hear a lot from what keeps me going today is that upbringing, is the opportunity to have worked as a child, which obviously wasn't the most pleasant, but it was a necessity. And I think I got a lot of skill sets because of that. being able to go to school every day and being able to make the most while in the classroom, and through those educational settings, being able to access new rich experiences that gave me an opportunity to excel. Fast forward, being, in elementary and middle school and high school, that same curiosity of why not me is what really led me to go to college. Again, I was the first in my family, the oldest, so it was my responsibility to figure out how we make this happen. It was my pure desire to become a teacher that led me to enroll in a program called the Teacher Cadet program. And it was for those students that saw themselves having a teaching career to enroll in the class and get some classroom experience. And so the program was a 2-year program, 2-year commitment. The first year was a classroom setting where you learned about what it meant to be a teacher. The second year was you actually was placed in a classroom setting. So I was able to go to different elementary schools and actually work during the school year, which at the end of the school year, we got like a $500 stipend. But again, it established a relationship with the teachers, it established a relationship with the students, and it gave me real in-classroom experience to say, yes, I want to be a teacher. This is what I'm going to do when I grow up. Now, the beauty about that, which I didn't know, was that the program was actually being sponsored by Sonoma State University. And so at the conclusion of that 2 years, as I was graduating high school, I was already a 4.0 student at Sonoma State because I had finished 2 semesters of coursework, and that made me eligible to go to the university. During that time, again, they were trying to prepare us to be able to do applications, and I went through that whole process because, again, we were already approved, so it was just a matter of formalizing it by doing an application. I got a letter in the mail 2 weeks later saying that I was formally accepted as a student, but I really didn't know what that meant. And I, quite honestly, in thinking back now, if I wouldn't have been in that classroom setting, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have enrolled. I'm knowing who I am today, I probably would have figured it out eventually, but that classroom and that coursework gave me the competitive edge to be able to apply and be accepted at the university, which then gave me this unique experience to actually move into a college setting and live on a college campus, which is not everyone's experience. And it was just because of the opportunity that I was given, and I said, yes, I want to participate. I went to Sonoma State, first in my family to go to school there. It was pretty hard. It was heartbreaking in some sense. We started, when I say we, there was about 50 students that were first-generation students that were asked to start school 2 weeks before the traditional school year started.
A bridge program of some sort.
Summer bridge through the ELP program at Sonoma State.
That's an amazing program that I know has helped a lot of students succeed.
Yes. And so I moved in with boxes, and they basically told us that we would be here for 2 weeks, no contact with parents or siblings. They wanted us to be there fully focused. And looking back, it was their way to kind of break the cycle around, what we could do. Because I'm almost certain I probably would have called my parents and said, come pick me up. Because the first 4 or 5 days, I cried myself to sleep every day. It was a terrible feeling. You were alone, and this is new grounds, and then this additional pressure of you're in college and you need to do really well for the family, and we're counting on you, but you're not really knowing what it is that you had to do. And as much as you were curious to learn, there was skeptical folks there as well, the counselors that would be there asking questions. Well, why are you taking so many units? And my answer was, well, I want to get out of here as soon as I can because I want to be able to help my family. And, well, no, if you take this many, you're going to fail because you shouldn't. And it was all these, you should, you shouldn't, you shouldn't. But there was no one that was really there to provide you the support necessary to move forward.
The strings were being pulled in different directions.
Yes.
Something new to you.
Something new.
In terms of cultural competency for some of the counselors, some of them probably didn't understand what you were going through,
Absolutely.
as being so close to your family and how close we are to our families and leaving for the first time. I never went to a sleepover or a summer camp. So now that I have children, it's very hard for me to think they're going to go away to a summer camp and spend the night somewhere else. So, very different for our community. So that must have been just really challenging.
Very challenging, very challenging. And then comes the pieces around you trying to figure out what you want and who you want to be. And you're growing. And as much as you're growing, you're still having to be there for your family, but then having to be there for yourself. And then you're trying to build this new community inside of your own classroom or your own, college setting to help support you because it's very challenging. The 2 weeks were a blessing in disguise as well. It gave us opportunity for me to actually touch a computer. we had access to computers at the schools we were at, but I would not have said I was an intimate user. I didn't know how to type, and I didn't know how to, access a computer, or even knew what a network was or any of those things. It was all very foreign. It was the first time that this concept of email was being introduced and a way of communicating via the computer. And so those 2 weeks gave us the opportunity to get grounded on these very basic tools that all of my competition, because everybody in those classrooms are competitions, we're going to be coming to the classroom with. Gave us an opportunity to register for classes, to understand what a class book schedule was, just all the very basics of the community college. They also helped us move into our dorms a couple of days early and just kind of get us acclimated. And that was the beginning of a lot of heartache for just being the first in your family to go to college, being that student in that college setting. Sonoma State was not a diverse campus to begin with. You knew the Latinos that were there. You could count them in your hands. So just kind of forming that relationship was a little bit tough. But the dorm setting, it was even a fewer number of Latinos and Latinas that were there. It was a lot of inclusive practices that were supported there. And even down to basic things as, a Sunday afternoon and, the roommates, their parents coming to visit the dorm and taking their roommates out to dinners and coming back. And although my parents would have loved to do that, there was no means to come up and take us out to dinner and to go do something nice, with your roommates, because it's just the affordability piece of it. And so the best that we could do was be able to have enough gas money to get in my car to be able to drive home and have dinner with my family. And so just seeing those experiences was like, wow, like they get all these things. And half of those kids hated every minute of it or dreaded seeing their parents. And some of us are sitting there thinking like, wow, wouldn't it be nice for my family to be able to come up and take us out to a nice dinner.
Yeah, I think I'm still traumatized because I never got a care package. All of my classmates used to get care packages from their grandmas and their aunts or their parents, and like my mailbox was always empty. So
all the time. I think I maybe checked my mailbox maybe a handful of times, the same reason. And I think I'm even lying that only certain kids had a mailbox. So you had to pay to have a mailbox. So I couldn't even afford to get mail at the college, personal mail, because you had to have had the privilege to buy a mailbox. That just wasn't something that we could afford. So it was eye-opening, to say the least. But again, I've always been the type that instead of being sad about why not me, it was more so like, okay, well, why not me? Like, what could be done that's a little different? It also helped that, being the first at the college, my second semester there, I met who's now, my husband today, who he himself was a first-generation college student, and he has a very similar background, or just backbone, I should say, in regards to what is it that he wants to get out of life. So I think it helped to meet someone like him that we both would kind of challenge each other around what we needed to do to kind of continue to move forward and grow and succeed and be competitive in the college place. So those were all things that really helped me. He went off to finish a master's degree because he's in education at San Jose State. And then I quickly realized that I was changing my major into business because I had to work the entire time that I was going to school. So I didn't have the privilege to take the coursework that was being outlined for teachers because those were being lectured during hours that most people, that I worked Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then
to put yourself through college.
Yeah. I had to work the entire time. So I always had the dual cap of working full-time and going to school full-time. And in order for me to keep going to school full-time, I had to find classes that were being taught in the evening hours. And the only classes, for the most part, that were being taught in those evening hours happened to be business courses. And so I started taking business courses while I was going to work, and I thought, this is the easiest way for me to get done. It wasn't that I was taking a major that, was interesting to me. It was, what is the degree that I could get to be able to get out into the marketplace, to actually get a job as soon as I can. And it just happened to be that those business classes mirrored up to the schedule that I had for work. When I soon realized that my major was then going to be business, my now husband was moving to San Jose, I stayed behind a semester because I was still thinking, what can I do with the degree that I have or what I want to get and the work that I'm doing, and quickly realized that San Jose State actually had an amazing business program. And not only did they have an amazing business program, it was during the time the dot-com era was going on. So there was an opportunity to work full-time and probably find more opportunities down here versus, Sonoma State, which is a small little, ag town. And I think that's what's really made the difference around where I am today and the opportunities that I have. Came down to San Jose State, finished my undergraduate while I was working at tech companies. Didn't know it at the time, but there were big tech companies. I actually worked for S3 Inc., which was the first company to ever create an MP3 player, the Rio MP3 player.
Wow.
I didn't know it at the time, but it was the next big thing. They were just the first companies to start with the online auction companies. So this is before eBay and all these other online auction companies where they were actually auctioning off their items, and it was a big piece of it. And that's one of the first roles I had, where I was in charge for managing the accounting that was happening on a mobile platform, which at the time it was just a net new. This is an internet piece, and people are going to be buying things. They're going to send you money, and then we have to ship these products. It was a new business model. And I did that for a couple of years, and then moved into another company that went into more of the mobile kind of web application pieces, which is known as Sonic Blue, and spent a couple of years there. And then I actually, at that time, received my first opportunity to be a manager of a receivables group, which was accounts receivable, and but it was not in the tech industry. And I remember calling my mentor at the time and saying, this opportunity came up. It's for me to be a manager in accounts receivable, obviously making more money, but it's not in the tech industry. And I'm nervous about, leaving the tech industry to do this role, and was actually in the construction industry. And I remember my mentor said, at this point, just focus about the skills and what you want to do, and go to that role, and you can always come back to tech. And I thought, easier said than done, but, she's right. Let me just go do this role. So I went over to work for a company called Labor Connection. And all these companies no longer exist. These are just companies that existed at the time. And got my kind of manager experience.
Your skill set.
Started learning about the fact that people actually traveled for work, right? Because when I was working at these companies, I was in an office all day. And this company had offices in Texas. So it was the first time I would have to, get on a plane for work and fly to Texas and stay there for a week or two to kind of do some trainings. Just all things that I think about from my career perspective that were net new, that it was like, wow, people do this, and people pay for people to do these things. It's important to them. And so I stayed in that space for a couple of years. And then from that perspective, went back into the tech industry by pure accident. And it was more so because a tech company was looking for someone that had the receivables and accounting background and had done work in the tech industry, but was really looking to create policy out of it. And so I went to work for WebEx, which was an online company, doing that. And then Cisco acquired us 6 months later. And the rest is history around just experiences there. But again, all of those pieces of what I've done all help to support one another. And I think back to just experience that I've been given, and each one of them may have seemed like it was an accident or a luck of a draw, but every action that I made has helped kind of build the platform for the next piece of the work that I'm doing. And even today, everything that I'm doing, I'm still thinking about what's next.
How to grow. I mean, you have a growth mindset, which I think makes it a difference for anyone that is trying to join not just the tech industry, but just any industry. You keep learning and you keep growing. You're now in a different area because you were in accounts receivable, accounts payable. You went from being a business major, and every tech company has business majors working for them. So it's not just we normally think about STEM, but you had a business major and you're doing really well, and you're working in diversity and inclusion. So can you tell us a bit about what it is that kind of you do on a daily basis, and what the term inclusion is, because everybody throws it around.
Yeah, no. So I feel so fortunate. I have a wonderful opportunity at Cisco. I am part of what we call Office of Inclusion and Collaboration, and that is, in most companies known as the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And to answer your first question, inclusion is just the way in which we build the mindset of folks to be more inclusive of all human beings, because all of us are diverse in some sense. Obviously, here in the U.S., we focus a lot around diversity initiatives around gender, around ethnicity in the U.S., abilities, sexual orientation. But we take it even further around skill sets, mindsets, the way people learn, social economic diversity, where people grow, have their families and the opportunities that they're given. So I have the opportunity to actually create and work on strategies to create inclusive and collaborative environments, primarily inside of our workforce for our employees, but also an extension of that is within the communities that we live in with our customers and our partners. And so my role is to ensure that we are thinking at all times how our employees feel, how they're showing up, and what opportunities we have to celebrate the diversity we have inside of the organization, and what opportunities we have for people to feel safe enough to either be allies or to ask questions to learn about how they can become allies to other communities that are not their own.
And is your role under HR or what part of the company? Because Cisco is such a big,
Yes.
wonderful, established company. Where is your role, and how could others potentially follow your footsteps in terms of getting to that type of position or just a role in a tech company?
So our organization is anchored in the human resource, so it is human resource. We have a chief global, we call global inclusion officer, who I report into. She's in the HR organization. I report into her, and my role, like I mentioned, is more so on the business side of it because there's so much that needs to be known from a business perspective. So to answer the question, most folks say, "Wow, your role looks so cool. Well, how can I get, how can I go work in the organization?" A lot of what I tell folks is go become a subject matter expert in something that you are passionate about that actually drives impact. I can tell you from my perspective, I was really passionate about finances, which is why I grounded myself in finance, accounts receivable, revenue recognition. That those are the pieces that made sense to me when I was growing, my building blocks. And then from there, I'm like, okay, strategy was really important to me. So I went to work for a strategy office where I did a lot of operations work around how you organize a company, how do you organize people, how do you organize thoughts. And then from there, I thought, okay, what are the next things that are really important in a company? It's data. It's how do you understand data? Data is so intimidating to so many people, but when you think about it from a business perspective, how do you drive insights from the data so you can actually drive decision making? And so I built all of those building blocks. I can tell you that the entire time that I was in those roles, I was always really engaged in the community work through employee resource organizations, giving of my time, being involved in different type of organizations, and I would get tapped on the shoulder. Why don't you come over into the HR and do this work? I was afraid to become a Latina that was passionate about this work and then being sent to do the work and kind of be dismissed, if that makes any sense. Because, of course, it wasn't a matter to me, right? Mexican American, Latina, first generation, I'm a female in the tech industry. It's going to matter to me. I'm going to want to do this work. But I always felt that I would be more of value and more of service to the company if I actually understood the organization and came in as a business leader first versus coming in as a passionate person that wanted to do the right thing for the company, which is why I spent 8 years of my first 12 at Cisco inside of the business, engineering, sales, services, to get really ingrained on what it meant to be a business leader. Now I'm on the HR side. I'm going on 4 years in that space, but I'm very connected into the business, and I'm constantly making sure that my projects, my initiatives are interlocked into a particular BU. So for now, my current focus right now is the engineering function at Cisco, which is the primary function from an innovation and technology perspective. And that's one part to be able to serve that organization because there's a lot that can be done to diversify the technical space. But the other piece is because I want to continue my learning. And my learning right now is really anchored on the technology and what's needed to be able to digitize the rest of the world because that's where we're headed. And so I think as much as what I've done, the roles that I accept are those roles that allow me an opportunity to have my runway on what I can contribute today, but also give me the runway to learn so that I can then continue to think about what I can be doing next because I don't see myself doing this role for the rest of my life. I want this to be building blocks for whatever is next. And I don't even know what that next is going to look like because most roles that I've had, either the role or the function has not existed, and we've created it because there's been a need for it. And so that's what I see myself doing in my career.
One of the things that you mentioned is that you've had different roles in different business units, and something I think that's positive from that is that you build allies too, because this kind of work, inclusion work, you don't want to be pigeonholed, which is I think you were saying, as a Latina woman, you're out there doing some things out of passion. You actually wanted to establish a reputation within the different business units and learn and then move on. But now you have allies that you can count on in the different units, and that helps you in terms of elevating your work, but also coming back to those business units and finding champions for the work that you're currently doing.
Absolutely. And it gives you what you need to build your brand, because a lot of it is around building what other people say of you versus what you think you are to someone. And so that's been my biggest focus. And where as much as you can build those allies, build that network, and have them help tell who you are and what your brand is, that will go a long way. A lot of the work that I do today as well is in the communities work. And although I'm Latina and although I'm female, I don't want you to assume that I'm passionate around supporting our women ERG because I'm a female, or I'm passionate about supporting our Latino Hispanic ERG because I'm Latina. I want you to say that I'm passionate about supporting every organization because inclusion matters to me. And so if I'm in a conversation with somebody that's part of our disability employee resource organization, they see that I'm there to be an ally, that I'm there to help support their strategy. The same thing for our veterans community, the same thing for our LGBTQ community, all those communities, that they don't feel that I'm being biased or that I'm supporting one group more than another because I don't, quote unquote, belong to the group. And that's a lot of the focus that I have in the organization.
Prior to starting the interview, we were talking about the amount of travel that you do, and also the fact that you are a global leader. You're not just focused in one city or one area of Cisco. You're thinking globally. So why should our community think globally when thinking about careers and collaborating with others?
The world is flat.
There's
There's a book. I was going to say, I remember my first
Friedman.
MBA class that I took, they handed us a book and it said, "The world is flat." And I read the book and I thought, wow, the world is really flat. And the more time we spend on this earth, the more devices and people are being connected through our networks and through technology. And that just takes away the reasons for us not to want to be global, and at least have that shared understanding that where we are today is just a small speck on a very, very big world. I'm fortunate to have a global role. I've had global roles, I would say, the entire part of my career, but definitely been much more focused on global over the last 8 years. And wow, it's mind-blowing to think about how you can create global strategies that are ones that are inclusive of so many different mindsets and so many different cultures, all driving, a similar outcome, but also at the same time being sensitive to what it means to be part of someone's culture and what it means to do business in someone's country. The learning there is forever. There's so many different opportunities. There's so many cultures. There's so many languages. And so I think for all of us that are sitting in the Latino community, even to understand the cultures within what makes up our community, when we say Latino community, we're so diverse within ourselves. And just having that mindset to be open, that you called out earlier, having a growth mindset, being able to be open, being able to be inclusive and not judgmental, and being able to take your learnings and just be mindful, because opportunities are everywhere. And I can tell you, every country that I've traveled to, you will find a Latino or Latina there. There may be one or two, but people are everywhere. And if you don't have that sheer desire to want to participate at the global level, or even just recognize that it's an opportunity there, you're missing out on huge, huge opportunities.
So think globally. Put your global hat on.
Yes.
What advice would you give to our Latinx community regarding key skills that they should be developing to stay competitive or to get in the game?
Be open to all opportunities. I would say, if you don't have a mentor, find a mentor. Take care of that mentorship, because that mentorship will turn into a sponsorship. And those sponsorships are what help connect you to opportunities. I would also say that as much as people want to help you, also be proactive to be able to help those that want to help you, make it easier for them to help you, if that makes any sense. There are so many opportunities where employees or students want to raise their hand for, say, a job. And as much as us as mentors want to help you, if we don't see that you're willing to take the feedback we're giving you and actually doing something with it, it's kind of like a timeout. Like as much as you want to be there, you need to show that you want to be there. Whether it's showing up with a new way in which you show up with clothing, or whether it's a simple haircut, whether it's the way you show up and the way you do your makeup. Very tactical, simple things, but they go such a long way. From a mentorship perspective, the people that will be mentoring you will be really, really busy. And so as much as you can organize yourself to make it easy for them to mentor you, that will go a long way. I can tell you that when people reach out and you can hear in their voice that they are actually passionate and want to, invest in themselves, it makes me want to invest more time in them. Versus someone that comes to you and does it just for so to say, I'm going to check the box to say I'm coming here to get a mentor. It doesn't. It needs to be reciprocal, and there needs to be value. I can tell you, I've learned much more from the people I've mentored than I think they've gained from me. But it has to be this relationship that you take care of, just like you take care of any other relationship. Your own advancement from a professional perspective, whether it be educational or in your work career, you have to invest the same level of care and feed. It does not happen by itself, and it will not happen overnight. So as much as you want something, you have to put the time in, whether it be listening to podcasts, whether it be picking up a book and reading something. If you're not a reader, whether it be going on YouTube and, looking something up that you're curious about learning. Whatever it is, to make sure that you're constantly learning and that you're differentiating yourself from other people. That is the biggest piece that I would call out for anybody, especially within the Latino community, that I see is always lacking. It's okay if you're the only one in a classroom. It's okay if you're the only one attending a seminar. It's okay if you're the only one that's participating in some kind of experiment. That makes you much more differentiated, and it shows your willingness, and you'll continue to stand out, and that will give you the opportunities to get a mentor or sponsor.
It reminds me of when I was getting ready to go to college, and I was accepted into a wonderful, private liberal arts college in Claremont, McKenna, and everyone around me, because I had 8 other offers somewhere else with full rides, and everyone else was saying, you should go to a place where they have more Latinos because, I think you'll be more comfortable. And I was talking to one of my counselors, and I was talking to also my family. I'm like, if I don't go there because they don't have enough Latinos, they're never going to have enough Latinos. So how are we going to make a difference for our community if we don't put ourselves in places that might not be as familiar or where we might not be as comfortable? And I think that's part of what you're saying. If you're not going to the mixers because, maybe people don't look like you, or maybe they haven't had the same experiences, you're not able to share your experiences with them and them to learn from you. And let's keep in mind that here, not just in the Valley, but in the tech industry, they're creating things. So how can they keep your perspective relevant, or our community relevant, if they're not really seeing or interacting as much with Latinx?
Yeah, and if we're not present, then guess what? Others are present on our behalf, and they're not representing our genuine selves. And that's my biggest thing for the Latino community. I say, if you're not willing, there are many others that are willing, that later don't ask, why aren't we being considered? Because there's always opportunities. We just have to show up ready and willing and putting in the hard work at the same time.
Let's talk about sponsorship. You mentioned earlier that you consulted with a mentor when you were transitioning from tech into construction, and then you talked about other mentors that you've talked. What difference has sponsorship as opposed to mentorship had in your life?
Oh, yeah. So mentorship, really important, right? And everyone should have. I call mentorship, it's table stakes, right? And in many cases, you have a mentor. It doesn't always have to be a formal mentor. A teacher could be a mentor. An older cousin could be a mentor. Cousin that's the same age as you can be a mentor, right? I used to always say there would be situational mentors. Those mentors I would call if I was getting ready to go to, a nice dinner and I didn't really know, what should I wear? And, so I call someone that I know that always goes to nice fancy dinners, and they'll tell me, well, you should wear this, right? That's a situational mentor versus it being a career mentor. With the example I gave earlier, there's an opportunity. Should I take it? Should I not? They're telling you, what they would do if they were in your situation or what you should do. A sponsor is someone that's actually guiding you, but more on a personal level around what stake they have in the game. So they're not going to be calling you and telling you what you should be doing. They're going to be talking to others about you in a light of what you should be doing for your next opportunity, right? They're talking about you when you're not in the room. They're the ones that are making sure that if someone is saying, Maria's doing a great job, no, Maria's not doing a great job. She's doing an amazing job. And let me tell you why. She's done X, Y, and Z. A sponsor can talk about what you can do for them. A sponsor is willing to give up their seat at the table to have you have the seat. That's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And sadly, most women and most Latinos do not have sponsors. They just don't know. Men sponsor each other all the time, which is why you see the statistics around, a male will see a resume, and if they're 50% qualified, they'll go ahead and apply. A female will look at that resume, and if they're not 100%, they're like, oh, I don't qualify. It's always that hesitation because, again, they're missing that sponsorship where those that actually have the confidence, they can rely on the sponsor to kind of help fill in gaps for them. And that's the biggest difference, and I think that's the biggest opportunity. I think we're light years away from a Latino community and understanding the importance of both. I would, just understanding the importance of having a mentor, and then hopefully that fosters into getting a sponsor. Mm-hmm. But if you are in a position where you know of someone that you admire, someone that knows of the work that you do, someone that can speak on your behalf and help you, that's where you want to form those sponsorships. And again, just as important as mentorships, just as professional, make sure that you're taking care of them, making sure that you're making the most of the time you have with the person. But that sponsor is going to be that person, like I said, that's going to put in the good word and that is going to look at you as someone, as if they were looking at their own careers. That's what a sponsor does for you.
That's great. And we need more sponsors within our community. The only way we're going to build that pipeline for our community is if we have more people like you sitting in the positions where you currently are or higher. Mm-hmm. So we'll be able to make a bigger difference. Speaking of sitting at the table, you're also involved in the women's empowerment movement, because I did a little bit of research before our interview. What advice would you have for some Latinas in terms of joining and being as successful as you have in tech?
I would say just get involved. And getting involved can be a number of things, right? I know that we're all busy. And as Latinas, we're great multitaskers. We're usually doing more than one thing at once, right? You may be a mom, you may be a sister, you may be a daughter. But whatever it is that you decide to do, make sure that you make the right level of investment from a time perspective. Invite others to join you. You don't have to be alone on this journey. And I think it's more powerful if you're able to invite a peer of yours. It could be a male, it could be a female. Invite family. Make them and help broaden their awareness as well, because many times they just don't know. And that can create a little bit of tension between family members as well. And it's not that they don't want to see you succeed or happy, they just don't know. And the more that you can explain things and the more that you can bring them along, it just expands their horizon, expands their viewprint around what opportunities they have. And hopefully if they have daughters of their own, if they are, obviously married or whatever it may be, they can help support and make sure the conversation continues, especially in our culture. There's a lot of conversation that we still need to continue to have, a lot around perceptions of what roles we should have, what roles we shouldn't have, who we should be in the household, who we shouldn't be when we're not in the household. And I think that the only way that we continue to change that dialogue is to continue to have the conversations with people and making sure that they feel comfortable and knowing that it's okay to have a career, right? It's okay to travel. It's okay to do that and still be a mom and a wife. It's okay to have successes. It's okay to, not take the traditional path. And then know that at the end, the outcome is just to live a happy, successful life. And the way you get there looks very different for everyone. But we have to be there to support each other. And I think from a Latino community, even separate from being a female, Latina, the Latinos aren't always the most supportive of one another. And that's something that we need to work on to make sure that we can create more and more opportunities for all Latinos.
A strong network, I think, and understanding how to mentor others and how to sponsor others, because it gets lonely when you're up there on the top. So in terms of sharing and bringing others with you, we have to do more as a community, I think. And this is my grain of salt, okay, to do more for the community, because people like you inspire others. And, what you're sharing about your personal journey, someone's out there listening and saying, oh, I have a similar experience. If she could do it, I'm certainly going to be able to do it. So encouraging and giving advice makes a huge difference. What we were talking about the pipeline earlier, and how we still need to create just stronger pipeline for our community. And this is even before they even get into thinking about the roles that they're going to be in the tech world. What advice do you have in terms of increasing the pipeline? I know that you volunteer for different groups. Have you seen any stories of success or anything that you'd like to share?
I think we as a community need to do more around just creating visibility on just the amazing opportunities that are out there for just the level of investment that's needed from a student, right? Math, anything in the STEM industry. It's such a beautiful, it's a beautiful educational track, but it requires a lot of research. It requires a lot of investment. It requires a lot of educational time. It requires a lot of learning. And a lot of the students that I run into, it's what's the quickest degree? What is it that I can do that's easiest to kind of get in and out? Not realizing the opportunities you leave on the table. I know I was probably guilty of that, when I was a lot younger. But there weren't, I think, as many opportunities as there are today as they were, as there are today as there were back then. And now the opportunities that were available 20 years ago were to a certain group. Like you were part of that small group and you got in, right? This is where all the folks that got rich off of, the .com era, part of that little niche group. Now it's become so much more open that this is free flow of currency that anyone has an opportunity to create the next best thing. An application, a company, a thought. There's just so many things. But instead of us being at the table to innovate and create, we're sitting there and we're being compliant with just being consumers, making others richer, right? Kids that we see, they're playing on apps and they're making those people that made the apps richer while our kids are just the consumers. And so we're missing out on all of these opportunities because people are just not willing to learn, not willing to invest a little bit of their time to learn something new. And so I try to change the conversation. I mean, even just young girls and just young people in general, where their first comment out of their mouth is, "Oh, I hate math."
You're dealing with teenagers.
I hate math. And I'm like, how can you hate math? It's so amazing. There's so many wonderful opportunities. And how do you change that conversation? You don't really hate math, but are you struggling with the part of it? Math is so huge. Like, how can you hate it all? Maybe you don't like decimals or maybe you don't like fractions. But parents have to have that conversation. People in general just have to have that conversation to change the mindset, because if not, the ones that are sitting in the classroom are the same students that have been sitting there, that their parents were sitting there, their grandparents were sitting there, and we're losing those opportunities as well. So it's how do we change the conversation, even if you don't have the answer, but just to give them more ánimo, right? Just to say, this is your opportunity for you to do something good. I can tell you last week I sent my 15-year-old to a cybersecurity camp for a week.
Wow.
Yes. And the first day I'm like, how did it go? Oh, it was boring. Okay, but what did you learn? Oh, just something about malware and something about, security loopholes and something about early access. But it was boring, right? Yeah, it was really boring. But now 3 new concepts. Oh, yeah. Then the next day she went back and, okay, what did you learn again? Oh, we're building firewalls now. And again, 1 week of the summer, she probably hated the week, but I can tell you she's a lot smarter now about cybersecurity. So at one point, do we take their choice away from them and put them in things that we know are good for them? Because we know. And again, not every Latino parent or family member has that, I call it luxury, but that's where you have to pay mind share to what are people talking about? Even if you're listening to the news, what are people talking about? And taking a little bit of initiative to do that research to figure out, how can I get them access or how can I learn more? I can tell you I'm a PBS junkie. I love PBS documentaries. It's information and it's, okay, what does this mean? And I don't watch anything on TV that I don't have my phone next to me and I'm Googling something because they said something. I'm like, I'm not sure. I want to learn more. Like I'm always have had that curiosity. And that's what I wish every Latino, Latina today had. So they didn't settle for just the basics. And that's what I'm finding to be the biggest challenge, that if we could just kind of shake them up and wake them up a little, they will see the great opportunities they have to use their voice and to use their minds for something good.
And sometimes we see that generations later of Latinx get, like you said, complacent or don't have the ganas or the drive that, some of us had when we were the firsts, right? It's funny you mentioned boring too, because my daughter, my 9-year-old, and my almost 6-year-old boy, they, as soon as they say, like, I'm bored. It's boring. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to build? What are you going to create? So somehow they figure it out. But, sometimes for us it's easier just to say, or for some families it's easier to say, well, vamos a prender la televisión, or let's turn on the TV, or let's do something else para que no se aburran, so they're not bored. But we can't. We have to get out of that mindset and really think about, how is my child going to grow with whatever activity he or she's doing? And I never went to a summer camp, but my kids are all in summer camps the whole summer. They're doing like different things that, things from ranging from tech to like going out into the wilderness, because I'm afraid to go out into the wilderness. But those are opportunities that we didn't have as we were growing up. So how do we change the narrative? How do we help our community to try new things? And kind of, it's a paradigm shift in some way, because we've been used to, as a community, of doing certain things a certain way. And just because we've been doing certain things a certain way doesn't mean that they're the right things or the right path. And obviously they haven't made a big difference in terms of increasing the number of Latinos in the professions that we want them to be, or helping the pipeline.
No, absolutely. It's funny you say that. I think I shared with you that I took my kids to the Pride March yesterday. So as a family, we went to the Pride March and we had a great time as a family. And I grew up in San Francisco, right? And I've never had once gone to a Pride parade. And so this morning I was telling my mom, like, wow, we had so much fun. And we lived in San Francisco for so many years. We never went. Like, why not? And, my mom's like, oh, your dad, he wouldn't have understood. And I thought, you know what, that's right. Like, there was not much conversation about that. And it's not because there's any ill will towards anyone. It's just not knowing, just lack of knowledge. It's like no sabiendo, right? It's just like the first time. And I, till this day, I think I was, where was I? I was at some really nice luxury resort in Santa Barbara a couple of weeks ago, and I showed up to this really nice salon, and it was a spa day that my peers and I were pulling together. I hadn't been in that type of spa ever in my life.
I want to go with you the next time.
No, walking in the room, not knowing. Okay, they knew what they were doing, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching them, pretending like I know what I'm doing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I find myself in so many situations now that I kind of just go with the flow. I observe and I watch. And one of my mentors that I till this day always thank her for what she said. I'm like, what do we do? We're the first in our family, like. How do we keep up with all of these folks that have done this type of work and or have come from families that go on summer vacations and they travel everywhere and they have family, vacation homes in different countries. And I go, what do you do? She's like, oh, we're great at mimicking. She goes, you just always walk in a room and you observe what other people are doing and you act as if. And she's like, and you never give anyone the reason to say that you shouldn't be in the room. And that's the attitude I take. But there's many times, and then sometimes when I'm, behind closed doors or I'm leaving the situation, sometimes I'll walk away laughing hysterically myself. So I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, they had no clue. And if they only knew that I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I was just trying to figure it out. And that can be applied to any situation in life. That again, you can't put blame on parents or families. Just we had no clue. We didn't know. Now that I do know, I have to be extra strict with my kids around what's expected, because I get that criticism now, for my family. Don't be so hard on them. You're too strict. We didn't do that to you when you were kids. I'm like, yeah, because you didn't know any better. And I do. And shame on me if I'm not preparing my kids, because I know many others are doing this with their kids and they're going to be left behind because I didn't want to be that hard on them. I'm like, I can't. Like, I can no longer ignore the situation because I know what exists now. And it's a different perspective. And like you said, different shift and different paradigm.
The blinders are off. So you're seeing everything with a different point of view. What tech tools do you use? Let's go back to our tech talk.
Oh.
What do you use? What do you recommend that people should not leave home without, besides the phone?
Yeah.
But, what are some of the things that our community should be learning more about or more into? And you mentioned cybersecurity. That's huge
Yeah,
for
it's
right now in
huge.
terms of growth of the industry.
So, smartphones never leave home without it, right? And it's bigger than just the phone. It's everything,
Your life in
right? It's
there.
my life in there. It's email. It's smart bots. It's team space, which are like how do you explain them? Instant messaging is what it's known outside in the non-professional space, but it's cloud application tools where you have opportunities to share information, share project ideas. So I'm huge on my MacBook. I'm huge on leveraging things like box folders to be able to upload box files and to be able to share with my teams from across the globe. Because my team sits everywhere but near me. They're in different states, different countries, but we're responsible for delivering big bodies of work. So whatever we're working on, instead of it just sitting on my laptop, we'll upload that to the cloud for them to get access to that. So any kind of application, tool, or platform, I'm all about that. But everyday tools are my smartphone, my laptop, my iPad, my iWatch. And it's more so just to keep me connected and making sure that I am keeping up because, again, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an employee, I'm a boss. All of those things, all of those roles carry responsibilities. I feel like everyone is always needing something. And so those tools help me keep it all together because without it, it just would all fall apart. And as much as I'm using technology, is how much of that technology can we bring into our home to kind of digitize that? How do we make sure our kids are connected with technology so it's safe for them, but they're using it in a way that's smart and that it's teaching them how to be more mindful around technology? And then how do we educate our elders who didn't really grow up with it, but just as much as we're getting value out of it, what can they gain value from leveraging technology? So it's definitely a disruptor, and I'm learning every day. So I do not claim to know everything around technology, but I definitely am the first to say that it's important. It's not going away anywhere. If anything, it's just going to continue to grow and expand and reach into our homes. And so my hope is that for our Latinos and Latinas that are listening to this podcast, that they take ownership and think about ways in which they can build a career around technology. There's so many different careers. There's tons of different careers. It's not the traditional kind of IT track or technology track. If you like to innovate, if you like to take things apart, if you like to think about security, everything in this world is getting digitized, and they'll need you to help in making that happen versus not just being a consumer, but being an innovator as well.
Thank you. And that's a great point to make. Not just being the consumer, but how do you build your own thing, and how do you get others involved that will obviously bring a different perspective. Something in terms of investment that I often think about is, we do carne asadas los fines de semana, or for Christmas, we have the toys and the shoes and everything else. I'm just thinking how important, tamales, yeah, but I'm just thinking how important it is, as you mentioned, just having a smartphone, because a smartphone is used by everyone. Like my mom is doing WhatsApp, and she sends me all kinds of prayers through, which sometimes I'm like, Mom, you're spamming me. But a smartphone, or knowing that maybe your primo or your prima or someone doesn't have a computer at home, how important it is to have tools of the trade. So as we think about investing smarter in our community and our families, understanding that this equipment is of importance not just to the kids right now, but to their future.
Absolutely. I think there's a level of investment that is required, as you mentioned, being able to invest in, even if it's one family computer, right? So that you can have access to your kids being able to know what it is to use a computer, investing in having internet services, really, really important just to connect with the rest of the world. Having a smartphone for the right reasons, not just for it to be used as a tool or to be used to make phone calls and whatnot, but how can it be used to help your life be easier, right? Banking, news and information, email communication, weather, communities that you connect with, down to watching your favorite telenovela if you want, but just understanding that you have the potential to be able to be more connected. But in that power also gives you the opportunity to have a voice, to be able to share what's important to you. What do you want to see on TV? What do you want to hear about on the news? Like, I think people underestimate the value of their voice today more so than ever, thanks to technology, because we actually now have the opportunity to share our opinions, share how we feel, share what we like, share what we don't like, and businesses are listening. And that's only happening if you're participating with a smartphone or with a computer. If not, you're being left out of many conversations that are happening. So I think as we think about what tools we invest in, those are tools that I would call, table stake, very basic tools. Just as much as you need a car or you need silverware to eat your dinner, you should definitely be investing in technology tools.
And speaking of getting feedback, if you're listening to this podcast, I'd love to get your reviews and also ideas for future topics that you'd like us to cover. So feedback is always very important, and especially in digital platforms.
Oh, so my little thing is feedback is a gift. If you're not willing, because I know that many folks, especially Latino communities, we're guilty of this, that we don't want to be rude. We don't want to sound like, we're being criticonas ni nada. So that feedback, ¿para qué? ¿Para qué digo algo? Porque se va a decir que soy chismosa o ¿para qué me meto si no es
Being
mi cosa?
chismosa is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes for the right reasons.
For the right reasons. I think the feedback is a gift, and if you don't share feedback that is meaningful and that will help improve, you're losing out on an opportunity to help make something better, and you're taking away the gift from the person that should be receiving the feedback. And I call that out because I've been guilty when I was first starting my career of wanting to shy away from feedback. It's not the right thing to do, but it's super important, and you have to think about that. And giving feedback helps you with your brand as well, because it says, wow, this person has a point of view, and they want to hear what you share. So yes, always give feedback.
Constructive chisme.
Yes.
I'm coining it here. Last two questions. Who influenced you the most and why? I know we talked about your family earlier. And then also, you talked earlier about you're always thinking about what's going to happen next. So what's in the horizon for you, if you can share?
Yeah. So it sounds cliche, my parents, obviously, but and both of them for different reasons. My mom, first, more so of just her love and desire to always be able to grow together. So she's always had the mindset around being a familia and always being very close and always respecting one another and being together. Very tenacious. She didn't go to college or anything, but she was always holding down, a job, and always one that was sought out after for her opinion. Which, in looking back, it's like people cared what she said or how she could, help support. So my mom's always the rock, always the one that was a feisty little, I say fighter, but feisty in a way of just kind of keeping us together and making sure we're moving forward. My dad, on the other end, although he comes from a huge family, he has 13, siblings.
Oh my gosh.
And my grandparents in Mexico, very family oriented as well. But he's always been more so of the soul in mind. My dad was a type that you could always find him reading a book, if not several books a day. He loved to read. So his love for reading, kind of helped me and just appreciating what it meant to, have a good book and to be able to invest in your mind. He's always talking about the mind piece. Always very much about the soul and just what it means to be a good human being. And so I think they're like a yin and the yang to each other, and they balance each other out. And that's kind of helped me and who I am as a person. Like, I'm very, very aggressive when it comes to like the business side of what needs to get done, how we show up, what we need to do. But I also take the time to pause to think about how important it is to remain humble, how important it is to be able to respect people at all levels, to be able to connect with people at all levels, whether they be, the receptionist, all the way up to the CEO, being able to be mindful of what's most important, and how you feed your soul and your mind to continue to move forward. So I think both of them together have been my inspirational idols. They love to fight with one another. I think that's what's kept me kind of feisty as well. It's like we're always up for a good argument and debate, but they're always about the family first. And I think that's what's been most meaningful and been my biggest inspiration. And for each, for their own reasons, have been subject matter experts in their own rights and what they do, and they're well respected, and they respect each other. So I think that's been most important. I think for me, the next thing, I don't know what that looks like, and I don't think I want to know at this point. I think I've enjoyed kind of learning and growing and figuring out what is that next thing for me. It hasn't gone wrong just yet. So my biggest piece is how do I continue to expand the visibility of the work that my team is delivering, the impact that we're having, the opportunity we're giving for other employees to participate and to feel safe in their skins, to be able to say, wow, I've been, hiding this for a really long time, but now I feel like I can share. I think those are things that are really, really important to me. Within Cisco, we're a growth company as well. We're always looking for new opportunities. So I think for me, it's anywhere that I can add value in the growth space for the company, and as much as I can do to drive that impact across the organizations. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. I just know that it's going to be something that's going to make me feel proud for working at the organization, and that it's going to give me the voice that I have and the passion I have to drive the difference. And it may be specific to just the Latino community. It may be for the globe, the globe as a whole. But I think just having that opportunity to share my voice and share my story is it will be inclusive of that. I just don't know what it's going to look like yet.
I just hope they continue to value the gem that they have in you. And thank you again for being so generous with your time. And I look forward to continuing to follow your path. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Maria shared with us many actionable items, so make sure that you write down and act upon her many suggestions. Here are some key takeaways from our talk today. First, don't limit yourself and be open to all opportunities, whether they are local or global. Also, be organized and proactive when approaching a mentor. As she mentioned, people will invest in you if you invest in yourself. So continue to learn, be prepared, and proactively nurture those key relationships. And finally, sponsorships are key to your professional growth. So create a list of potential sponsors and begin reaching out to them this week. I am hopeful that stories like Maria's will help us change the narrative for our community. I am grateful to be able to bring these stories to you, and I hope that you are inspired to grow professionally like Maria and advocate and support other Latinx, since shared efforts and leadership will really help us advance as a community.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook at LatinxAmerica and on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.